can't murder me today. I'm immune!
So,
Bacon.
basically it's like, Lord Sisyphus, put it here on the drawer rung, and then it's like, slam, ow, slam, ow, slam, ow, slam, ow! And that's being British.
I think that's how the British actually do it. Like,
That's how they make,
babies.
cabbages.
It involves door slamming and cabbages.
Or drawer slamming.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, ow! Yeah, that's...
Oh.
Because if you've got royal blood, apparently the cliche is that you're a little sexually weird.
I'm
and
shocked.
there is your first clue that this podcast is maybe going to be a little blue.
So, ladies and gentlemen, before we start ArtIswear officially, we're going to go ahead and put a trigger warning ahead of time. This podcast today will cover some very interesting approaches to relationships.
Have you read 50 Shades of Grey?
Have you absorbed 50 Shades of Grey?
Do you know that 50 Shades of Grey is actually kind of wussy and that the story of O is older and dirtier?
Have you read the Kama Sutra?
Okay, so, this is not the podcast for your 5-year-old. And by the way, I'm Vanessa Van Alstyne.
I'm Katie Gibbs, and this, officially, is Art, I swear.
She just likes saying that because she gets to say it goofy.
I do. It makes me happy in all my happy spots.
So, the artist today is Francis Bacon!
Bacon, 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 bacon!
And this is not to be confused with Sir Francis Bacon, the 18th century occultist philosopher and statesman.
He is a relative, though, but before that, let's just go ahead and say that this is the third in our 4-podcast run of LGBTQ artists. We're covering them because of the tragedy that happened in Orlando, and we thought that this would be a good way to honor some of the people who fall outside of the normal hetero white male spectrum.
Even though Bacon is a white male, let's just leave, yeah. Anyways.
But he definitely was not hetero.
Oh yeah, I watched an interview with him where his legs are all like crossed up high versus like at the ankle where dudes usually do it, and he's smoking a cigarette between his fingers with this very like eloquent twisty wrist gesture, and just has this like little tongue-in-cheek like wicked smile.
Oh, so femme and so gorgeous and so lovely.
I would never call him gorgeous. Speaking of things that are not perhaps ever described as pretty, if you are disturbed easily, Francis Bacon is easily one of the most
visually disturbing artists.
And it's not that his subject matter is even particularly grotesque, but how he handles it and the like atmosphere of it. I don't know this for sure, but I would really not be surprised to find out that Clive Barker is a big fan, like the guy that did Hellraiser.
Oh, that would make sense, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's British. He was born around the height of Bacon's career. He's at least aware of him, but if somebody owns a Francis Bacon, my money's on Clive Barker. Speaking of gay British men.
All I hear is bacon, and now I have to rethink my dinner plans.
I had a club sandwich for lunch, just, in honor of old Francis. Norma's, have you ever had their, like...
Not the club.
Oh, it's good, and they do the, like, homemade potato chips. Yeah.
I had yogurt. I had oatmeal for breakfast and yogurt for lunch, so I have to tell you that this diet is killing me, and I'm hungry.
I wake up in the morning, I put a berry mix, some spinach, and some, like, an orange vegetable, like carrots or yams or something, and with oatmeal and coconut milk and a little cocoa powder and some matcha powder, blend that. It's good and it's filling, believe it or not.
Oh, I'm not, like, super hungry. We just keep talking about bacon.
Yeah, I'm...
Like, the Pavlovian response to drool every time we say bacon and or giggle is not going to be repressed now.
It is very hard for me not to call this artist the Baconator.
Why are you stopping yourself?
I just, and it's like some of his artwork could probably be described as Baconator-y.
Or at least Baconator Jr., which, by the way, the difference between the Baconator and the Baconator Jr. is just one slab of beef. Air quotes around beef.
So, if you haven't picked up on it, probably another way that... So Bacon's artwork, as we said, disturbing. Some of it's probably a reflection of being closeted. He was born in 1909, which, if you remember from our last podcast on Agnes Martin, she was born in 1912 alongside Jackson Pollock, so that should kind of give you an idea of how old he is and when he's coming to age.
The genre in which he is welcomed into the world.
You're welcomed into a genre?
Yes.
Is ours, like, dramedy?
Ours is probably dramedy.
We're Greek tragedy kind of people.
Politically speaking.
I'm probably gonna end up, like, murdered with my son I didn't know I had.
Really?
Yeah.
That sounds more soap opera-ish, because then you're gonna pop up later and you're gonna be like, but no, we're not dead, and that's not my son, he's actually my lover.
Have you ever read Oedipus Rex?
Yes.
Okay.
But I just needed the soap opera
Okay,
reference.
if that makes you happy, I'm not gonna... Not arguing with you is part of how I've maintained this friendship for, like, 16 years. If only our husbands would learn that.
I just know to push just so far to get that good staccato beat out of that vein above your left eye, and then back off. Slowly back off. And then push again, back off. It's a dance. We're tangoing.
It's part of why this isn't a video podcast, is I just really don't want to give her the glee of being able to replay the look of horror she puts on my face over and over again. Francis Bacon's early life. And Katie, this is not going to be the worst Francis Bacon podcast ever, like we had the worst Agnes Martin podcast ever.
To be fair, the subject matter with Agnes Martin, I still maintain, awesome person, really difficult art to wrap your head around.
I will say Bacon's art's difficult, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
I would own a Francis Bacon, though.
I would, too.
Yeah. So, that's our opinion there. So he, like we said, he's related to the famous occultist / philosopher / statesman who existed during the Elizabethan era, who was Sir Francis Bacon.
Two totally different people.
But, yeah, I mean, this Francis Bacon was never trying to scry into the ether, to my knowledge.
He was trying to scry into people's... Never mind.
Into men's... Anyways, maybe. Okay, so, yeah. I can't make those jokes. His father was a Major Eddie Bacon. He was a military man. Stop laughing at the word bacon.
Major Bacon.
Major Bacon. You gotta get enough Major Bacon in your mouth. Major Bacon apparently, he had like 5 kids, so, that's apparently some impressive Major Bacon. Basically they lived between England and Ireland trying to make it rich. Francis Bacon's mother, Christina, came from way more money and is where a lot of the royal pedigree came from. But he was mostly, him and his siblings were mostly raised. Francis Bacon and his siblings were mostly raised by a nanny named Jessie Lightfoot, and she kind of lives with him through most of his life and kind of sucks his money dry.
These things happen.
As you do. As you do when you're a British nanny.
So, Bacon himself was asthmatic, he was effeminate, and he was the bane of his masculine father's life. So his father becomes kind of the ideal for Francis, but he can never really live up to that because that's not the person he is.
When I say ideal fellow in the notes,
No.
I don't mean that's who he wanted to be.
No.
I mean that's who he wanted to have.
No, just let my little prudish mind have this for a second, and now it's crumbling. That's okay.
He wanted to be loved by a brutish, violent man like his father. Older, brutish, violent man.
That does explain so much.
And he even has some relationships that are so violent because he wants them to be. His best friend forever, Lucian Freud, actually saw how beat up he became and attacked one of his lovers. Some of his portraits are of him having been happily just, like, beaten by his lovers. It was kind of a trigger words beat and rape scenario, except it's consensual. Lucian Freud, if you're hearing that now scratching your head, grandson of Sigmund Freud, very, very close friends with Bacon. They influence each other a lot. But there's a question as to whether or not they were together. Everybody thought Freud was a heterosexual for a long time. It's now come out in some letters that he did have homosexual relationships. So, like we drew with Georgia O'Keeffe, probably bisexual.
That doesn't mean that he had a relationship with Bacon. Possibly.
There is a possibility, though.
Right. There's the possibility. It just... Lucian probably couldn't satisfy the needs that Bacon had.
Well, and Lucian was married most of the time that they were really close, so...
Fair.
You know, maybe who knows.
So in 1926, when Francis was 16... he was expelled from his family after being caught by his father trying on his mother's underwear.
Yeah, talk about not being able to ignore the fact that your son's just
a little
gay.
poofter.
Like a little gay.
Yeah.
A little gay there. Not that you're gay if you wear women's clothes, but...
they'd probably been repressing it for quite some time, as you do, because British. And this was just visceral evidence that they couldn't ignore anymore.
Once again, like with the Agnes Martin podcast, the way you treated homosexuality was to ignore it and pretend it didn't exist unless there's like a bright red sign in front of you.
By that time, Bacon had already had several relationships with stable hands.
Yeah, his dad was into horses. Haha. Haha.
Well, not like Bacon was into the stable hands, I hope.
Yeah, let's stop.
No, I can't.
Yeah, I've done this to you. Look what twisted or broken you. Ah, finally. It just took me nearly 20 years.
In 1927, Bacon's father sent him to Germany with his mother's friend Harcourt Smith in the hopes that the uber-masculine Harcourt Smith will, quote-unquote, straighten him out. Unfortunately, that plan backfired, and they developed a relationship with very kinky sex. Very kinky. Harcourt Smith was actually exactly Bacon's type, and Francis delights in the fact that he could stick it to his dad, so to speak.
So to speak. So wink. So to L wink, nudge nudge, L wink. So
Wink,
to
wink.
speak. Wink wink, nudge nudge.
Say no more, say no more, say no more.
I like that we're both Eric Idle. And I'm going to point out, this does show how Victorian views on homosexuality are really hurtful. The Victorian view of homosexuality is damaging. If you look at what it does to Francis Bacon here, it drives him into the arms of an older man that really kind of doesn't care about him. And it makes his deviance a bit worse, which I'm not ever going to diss on the BDSM community. That's fine. What you do between you and your consenting partner is no one's business but your own. However, I think it's very easy to see that Francis Bacon's relationships
went past consensual and way into things that even in modern days we would consider abuse.
Yeah, like safe, sane, consensual, right? I think that you can argue his, like, sane part is maybe... It's not safe. It's what he likes is definitely not safe.
And he's definitely not sane.
No, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that he's diagnosed with anything, so please don't sue me, estate of Francis Bacon. But
the definition of insanity is going and doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah.
He kept doing the same thing over and over again.
And, yeah, not getting very different results. I mean, or he's not looking at the long term in a healthy way. It's like, so please, like I said, don't jump on us. We're not trying to shed a negative light on the BDSM community. We're shedding a negative light on Francis Bacon.
Just a little bit. Just in his life choices.
His kinky life choice. He's repeatedly, like, puts himself in harm's way and sets himself up for a later relationship that is not healthy.
It's the opposite of some serial killers, where the only way they can get off is through killing something or death or something like that, and the only way Bacon can get off, so to speak, is by somebody beating the bloody hell out of him.
I would also like to stress, if his sex life wasn't important to his paintings, we would not bring it up. Because, like, it would be a minor footnote, like, because we don't care.
We're not digging into people's bedrooms because we're voyeurs.
Homosexual sex appears in a lot of his paintings. He makes paintings of himself having been hurt during sex. Some of them deal with the psychological ramifications of the isolations his extreme fetish causes later in life. So this isn't just us being looky-loos, and, we're trying to be sensitive.
There's a first time for everything.
Yeah, there is a first time for everything. I'm glad we can have this first time together. We should now hold hands and go pee in the girls' bathroom together. Because that's what girls do in the girls' bathroom.
I hate that. I hate the mentality that girls have to group up and it's a freaking social scene in the bathroom. I don't know if it's because I'm an introvert or because I'm a parent, but by God, my bathroom time is my freaking quiet time. Back to Bacon.
Okay, so Bacon and Harcourt Smith are in Germany at this point. He's kind of traveling around Europe. In Germany, he sees a very famous silent film called Battleship Potemkin. Why are you laughing?
Because I wanted you to say that one.
Battleship Potemkin.
Because you were so worried about saying it yesterday that I had to be on the podcast that you said it.
Thank you. I mostly said it right. And this is by the Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein. Eisenstein is an early Soviet director. He comes up with the theory of montage, and he considered it the ultimate form of propaganda, which is mostly what he's concerned with creating.
We're gonna do a montage!
Yeah, that exists because of him. He comes up with a lot of your early cutting of film theories, because in early silent film they're kind of still treating it like a play, and if you think about a play, that's a still area that you bring the background to. And yes, they realize pretty early on that they can go to different places, but Eisenstein really perfects cutting and adding things in, and how you view things and how you perceive time. And if you ever take any kind of film or film theory class, you're probably going to watch this or some of his other propaganda
You're gonna
films.
know who Eisenstein is.
You are. The Battleship Potemkin is about a ship that is hijacked by its crew. What is it? Mutinied. Mutiny is the word. They come back to the city of Odessa, and I think it's Odessa because they end up on the Odessa steps, so that makes sense to me. I should admit that I've only seen clips of this film. Silent films are hard to watch. So, the mutineers come back. The people that have been waiting for the ship to come home from it being at sea for a really long time have all shown up. The Russian army, however, is aware that it's been mutinied and show up with guns, and there's a massacre on the Odessa steps. This is a very weird clip. Did you watch it, Katie?
No.
Yeah, that's what I thought, so I'll describe what shows up. There's elements, when they started at the top of the steps, there's a person lifting an umbrella. There's a person with no legs, moving around on their hands. There's a lot of children. Children die in this. There's montage clips to people that are fine and then screaming with bullet wounds. There's a pram that falls down the steps and the umbrella keeps repeating. There's also these very beautiful minimalistic moments where you see a woman cradling a dead child begging for mercy while the like silhouettes of soldiers stab into her like knives before they fire. This is surprising for a film from the 20s, right? It's actually... It is kind of hard to watch for an early film like that. Like, if it was in color, it would be really awful. And he does kind of treat the bodies in the film, too, like they're just meat. People step on them, they trip over them, the soldiers trample them.
How Soviet.
Yeah, cheery Russian films. And these themes show up in a lot of Bacon's later work. And this also, I want to point out at this point, it mirrors our previous conversations on how media influences artwork. There's that like transitional quality of film. There's that messed with perception of time, and films are becoming more and more common, so more and more people are seeing them. People are also seeing atrocities on the news. And, you know, Bacon lived through World War I as a young man, late kid, young man.
World War II.
World War I.
Well, yeah,
but yeah, and he did, but this, we're talking pre-World War II at this point.
Okay. I'm just saying, he lived through many world wars.
He did, yeah. It's crazy. World wars are crazy, it turns out.
War is crazy.
Never mind, we've been at wars almost as long as I've known you. I knew you like a year before September 11th, and...
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, we were both in junior college.
You were one of the first people I called.
Yeah, my mother tried to crawl in bed with me, and I slept naked, and that was awkward. And I was just like, no, Mom, there's some boundaries even collapsing buildings can't cross.
I remember that. Oh my god.
Yeah, I was like, no, Mom. Just no.
So Bacon moves to Paris.
Well, yeah, he travels around to Paris. He was kind of already painting. His maternal grandmother was really encouraging. Do you want to talk about the painting that influenced him, Katie?
You just like to hear me say the French words. Bacon was greatly influenced by Nicolas Poisson's The Massacre of Innocents from 1628 to 1629. It's actually really cool, I think, that he looked to not just his contemporaries, but to the older paintings to get some inspiration.
Yeah, when you look through his work, it's either Battleship Potemkin or classic painter, like Renaissance painter, a little before.
Like Poisson, which, by the way, means fish.
Mr. Fish. If he'd have been British, that would have been like the most British last name. But no, he was French, so it sounds fancy.
Can you describe the painting? Because it doesn't come up on my outline appropriately because cue Apple.
This, for early Renaissance, this is a pretty... Actually, I guess this is high Renaissance. Whatever. I'm not a Renaissance scholar. Neither is Katie. This is fairly minimal, though, I will say that. There's a lot of, like, kind of flat areas. I mean, they're detailed, but it's not as detailed as it could be.
It's not crammed with figures and movement. This
landscape
actually allows for us to focus on the focal points.
Mm-hmm.
Shocking.
And it's a woman grasping a man as he lifts a sword and is about to slaughter an infant. He's got his foot on the infant's neck. It's extremely violent. The man's also, like, holding the woman back by her hair. There's another woman lamenting in the background.
Pulling her hair, gnashing her teeth.
Yeah, it's... The colors are also very vivid. Its primary colors, like a red, cobalt blue. I bet if you clean this up, it would be, like, obnoxiously bright.
Oh, thank you, aging. And paints.
And candles.
But it's very violent, and it's actually very disturbing imagery, and I can see why Bacon liked it so much, because that appears to be his style.
Yeah, he likes the disturbing, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's Bacon. And, you know, I think it's telling that it's a man enacting violence on a child. I think that's a little boy. I'm gonna have to zoom here.
Let's just
it's a
assume,
little boy.
Yeah.
So that kind of fits with his narrative, too. Like, Bacon relates to the, like, overpowering male figure hurting the child. And he didn't really, though, take painting seriously until he sees an exhibit by Picasso. So we can kind of transition to the 30s here, and he has a surprising job for a disturbing painter, but maybe not a effeminate gay man.
He's an interior designer.
Yeah. Makes furniture and textiles and
in Paris, geez, that's to be an interior designer in Paris.
Well, he comes back to England for a lot of that.
Don't dissuade me from
I'm
this.
dissuading you because you're wrong.
Well, still.
I'm gonna punch you in the tattoo.
Oh, I'll lick you again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But still, to have been in Paris and been an interior designer and then bring that back, even in the 30s, God, that has to be awesome and meticulous.
And he's so young. Like, he's in his 20s doing this.
So he's got to have a really good eye for how space works and how furniture can fit in there, because it is mind-boggling. And I took a course on French furniture at one point during my career, and yeah, thank you. Rococo.
It's fancy stuff.
They do some shit.
Lots of hidden drawers. I'm going to kind of skip through some of this and talk about Crucifixion from 1933 by Bacon. You see emerging already this interest in religious iconography, but in a way that kind of spits in the face of religion. He's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God, so don't think that this is some kind of, like, hidden devotional thing. He also has an interest in, like, medical x-rays and skeletons that show up at this point. This is a black and white painting of I think it's actually a bird skeleton that's been, like, hung so that it looks kind of like Christ on the cross. And there's these different toned geometric elements that all kind of point into it.
And it's not... It's not just a skeleton. It's taken apart, and it's
like mushy meat.
It is mushy meat, but also the rib cage is down towards the bottom, but the head's towards the top.
Yeah, it's a biomorphic. It's not a actual creature per se, and that's another thing that consistently shows up in Bacon's work. His figures are usually not figures, or they're not complete figures. They're just like the bare essence of human, and it's like the meaty, nasty quality of being human. He does try to compete with the surrealists. If you're, like, remembering our surrealist podcast and being like, those guys were around in the, like, 20s and 30s, they kind of really don't want anything to do with him. They're like, ew.
Because the essence of his work wasn't the essence the surrealists were going for. Like, they were trying to transcend. Bacon just wants to, I think, in the end, show the raw base.
Yeah, there's a banal quality to his work. It's about, like, banality and the sick essence of human, and the surrealists want this, like, idealized dreamscape that takes you away from reality. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So you could compare it and go, well, it is kind of a surrealist quality, but that's not what he was going for. He was going for degradation. And
if you want us to shove him into a genre, by the way, that's not going to happen well. I feel like he's a very early postmodernist.
I'd call it, yes.
Yeah, you could probably call him the grandfather of postmodernism. He doesn't fit with Abex. He doesn't fit with surrealism, really.
He doesn't pigeonhole well,
He doesn't.
basically.
He really doesn't.
And that's okay.
So when World War II rolls around, his asthma and the fact that he's very effeminate, he's not fit for service. He's just not physically capable because of the asthma.
Aw, Steve Rogers, except for, effeminate and into...
That would make the, Winter Soldier shipping, 100% here.
It's not gonna happen. Bucky does not want to sleep with Steve Rogers.
But Steve wants it.
I don't care what Steve wants.
Secretly.
I don't care what Steve would. No, Steve.
It's like 13. You could cross over the Phantom of the Opera with Civil War and
Steve, Agent 13.
Secretly yearns for Bucky.
Steve and Agent 13, Sharon Carter. It's a little weird, but I'll ship it, and I'll take the Winter Soldier and Natasha Romanoff and ship that too. Because it happens in the comics, it's gonna happen in MCU.
Secretly.
Don't you stucky on me, I will cut you.
Yearns for Bucky.
I will lick you.
I'm stopping. Bacon does work for the Civil Air Defense. He helps out with air raids. And, I don't know this, but I kind of think he had to have, loved the air raids, think about it. This guy likes, meaty, gross meat. Or he likes painting meaty, gross meat. He probably enjoyed that chaos. I mean, it makes sense to me that...
He likes being turned into meaty, gross meat,
That's
too.
okay. We're just going to keep going on. But basically, Bacon's asthma gets so bad because of the city falling down around him. He has to go out into the country to heal up.
Hello, asbestosis. How do you feel today?
I feel like mesothelioma. How do you feel?
Whee! Technically, did you know that if we all didn't die of other natural causes, and could live to whatever age, we would all still be killed by mesothelioma? It eventually will kill everybody.
So you're saying we'd all become Deadpool?
Yeah, yes. Sure.
I think there was a time in my life where people would have shipped that for me.
You mean we're supposed to stop?
Anyways.
1940.
So 3 figures for the painting, 3 studies, 4 figures at the base of a crucifixion, 1944. Bacon really hammers down the painting now that he can't go out and do stuff because he's got the asthmas.
And he's out in the country, so he can't help with he can't help with the war, so he starts with the paintings.
This is a triptych, which is traditionally used in altarpiece paintings for religious works. So once again, you kind of have that finger to the church. And these are... Man, I always think Pink Floyd's The Wall had to have looked at this painting. Primarily orange background. It's 3 figures separated by the canvases. One's hunched over with this elongated neck and no limbs. It's just a torso, and it looks like its flesh is being ripped from it. It's kind of sitting on the bare outline of a table, and it's got hair over its face.
It looks almost like a really fat flamingo. An albino fat flamingo.
Alright. The next one is even more bird-like. It's this clumpy mush with this elongated neck and just a mouth and a rag at the end. And the final one is screaming. It's this wide open mouth with kind of a proto eye, and they don't really have chins or hair or anything, but it's kind of coming out of a rug, and it's got this Salvador Dali-esque pin leg, and once again this lumpy body with the hint of emaciated ribs.
But it still has a little bit of musculature, which I think is the difference between looking at Bacon's figures and Dali's figures. Is that Bacon still understood human anatomy, and
not that Dali didn't, but he's referencing it.
He is referencing it better, even though his figure isn't human at all. You
can still see the obsession, or the beginning of the obsession, with painting elements from Battleship Potemkin. And that the nurse, the scene where the tram is going down the stairs or about to, a nurse screams, it cuts to the tram about to fall, you see her screaming again, cuts to it really about to fall, and then when it starts to fall, you see a bloodied eye and blood going down her face with still the screaming mouth. And this is... I think about the screaming that shows up in his paintings, and I also think about the inability to breathe. This is a man whose life is hampered by the fact that he's never going to be a sportsy outdoorsman because his lungs just don't work.
Well, and he's never going to be accepted because he is, in his time, so deviant from the norm.
Yeah, it's like screaming at the realization of the horror of just living and the horror of having a body. And it's, when you frame that in like a holy triptych, it becomes this like contemplation on the sanctity of horror. That sounds like the beginning of a Dario Argento film, which you've probably not seen, but...
I think you've made me see one.
Probably Deep Red.
That sounds right.
Pondero Rosso, yeah.
I might still blame you for that.
So, another one we want to talk about is Painting from 1946. This has the umbrella essence from Battleship Potemkin. There's a straight up like slaughtered cow hanging up like Christ in the background. There's a lot of pinks and reds and purples and these like dismembered like meaty rib cages in various forms of slaughter. And there's a seated figure that kind of references one of the nurses from Battleship Potemkin, who's this woman that's very like manly looking. And it's a horror show.
Bacon claimed that it began as an attempt to paint a bird alighting on a field, but ended as an assemblage of meat carcasses and a mutilated, almost headless man beneath an umbrella.
And it's influenced by Rembrandt.
You know, I have not seen that Rembrandt.
I haven't either. I don't know what Rembrandt it was referencing. By the way, a lot of this information comes from the webpage representing Bacon's estate, which is francisbacon.com. For all your Baconator needs, francisbacon.com.
Bacon, 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 bacon!
And at this point, I did bring up some, what is considered slightly biomorphic surrealism. Salvador Dali's Uranium and Atomica, Melancholia, Idol from 1945, and Hans/Jean Arp's Impish Fruit from 1943.
So we can see his contemporaries, but again, surrealism and what Bacon created are totally different because of the intent.
Yeah, and you can see that Dali, it's very busy. While the background's still fairly flat, it has more of that like simplified modernist quality, and the ARP is these layered pieces that look like a heart. And ARP's considered a biomorphic surrealist, so that would be the area
3D
that
wood pieces,
yeah, this is the area that Bacon would apply to, but it's layered 3 wood pieces. I mean, it's not,
but it's the intent,
and it doesn't have. It's just not as horrific. There isn't that like. Bacon has a very masterful ability to put thin layers on canvas. Which Dali still has this like thick kind of Renaissance quality of painting, and a lot of surrealists do as well.
And the Impressionists still do. I mean, contemporarily speaking.
Yeah, not a lot of people are good at painting thinly. Painting thickly tends to be where a lot.
Because you can build layers, and you can kind of manipulate your canvas more. So a thin layer of painting is...
Well, that's actually how the Renaissance masters painted. It was like layer, varnish, layer, varnish,
right.
Layer, varnish. And so Bacon, while he's painting more truly to the Renaissance masters, he's doing it in like a ridiculously thin way.
It's almost like watercolor because it's precise.
It's like Degas too, where you can see the like under stuff
of the canvas.
Yeah, because if you see a Degas in person, you really can see a pencil mark.
Oh, they're beautiful though.
I have never actually seen a Bacon in person. I know the DMA and the Fort Worth Modern has them, but for some reason they don't put them out often.
We don't want to disturb the public.
I
think the public's already disturbed. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we had a scary weekend in Dallas.
We'll address that at the end, but I'd like everybody to know that we are all safe.
We're fine. We weren't even like close to anything. Probably Bacon's most famous painting came out during this period, and this is one you will see in academic textbooks. Like anything that covers modern and contemporary art, this painting is pretty much guaranteed to be there, and it's Head 6 from 1949.
Bacon said, "I didn't do it in the way that I wanted to. I wanted to make the mouth, with its beauty of its color and everything, look like one of the sunsets or something of Monet."
And it is this screaming mouth that's really kind of like a mouth set within a mouth. It's a seated figure. I mean, you can tell it's seated, but you can't really see in what. There's kind of a transparent cube around it, like a reference to like gold filigree or writing, but the background's done in this like thick, like transparent kind of watercolor
gray wash almost.
It has purple robes that are like reflected up onto what remains of like just a screaming mouth, the bare essence of a nose, a little bit of an ear, and you can kind of see the reflection of eyes there in the darkness over the head.
Right, but there's no end to the head. Like there's no top of the skull. There's no... The figure of the mouth is actually, I think, quite detailed, and then it just goes up into nothingness.
Like Goya's Saturn devouring his children.
Yes.
This is one of those paintings that has always just, like, sat with me. As a child, I would, like, stare at it in books and just be horrified.
Can we do a Goya one sometime?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's... And before we do it, we need to, like, go to the...
Use your words.
Go to SMU's Spanish. They have the biggest collection of Spanish art outside of Spain. Anyways, and Goya is a huge influence on Bacon. The Head 6 also does reference, once again, the nurse from Battleship Potemkin. It's stupid Russians. Not that y'all are stupid, don't hack me. He's also referencing straight up a very famous painting by Vasquez, Portrait of Pope Innocent X. He had never seen this painting. He's only ever seen photographs of it. And if you haven't gathered from hearing me prattle on, actually seeing a painting is very, very different than the photograph. Photographs skew color. They don't make the transparency of the oil paint apparent. It's just a very... And, you know, sometimes you're like, wow, this is a really famous painting. I can't wait to see it. Fragonard's The Swing. It's in every art history book. Oh my god, it's tiny. It's like not even poster size.
The Mona Lisa.
Used to be a much bigger painting, now very tiny. You could buy a frame for it at Michael's and not pay a whole lot of money. That's how I reference things, what frames at Michael's cost versus...
Alright, that's fair.
What has my art degree done to me?
Put you in thousands and thousands of dollars of debt?
You need to, like, up that into tens of... Nearly 100. Anyways. So... The next one we're going to talk about is 3 Studies for Crucifixion, 1962. Broseph, like, really into crucifixion.
He's really into those triptychs.
Do you want me to describe this one again, or do you... I don't want you to feel like you're losing out on describing the art. These are hard to describe.
No, this my MFA friend is all you. I'm petting her shoulder as I do this.
3 Studies for Crucifixion is one of the pieces that really helps launch his career. It's a triptych again. The farthest one, based on how we view it, seems to have a pair of, like, deformed legs on a bed. And there's a pair of onlookers who are, like, twisted and leaned over and kind of looking out a window, but distracted from the window in this, like, red-orange and straight-up orange room. And, like, kind of glaring voyeurs. In the center triptych, we have the same red-orange and bright orange room with a crude bed and 2 meaty figures combined together in the center. And when I say meat, it's like their skin is stripped off. They're laid bare. And this is one of the paintings where they're having gay sex. It's not obvious because they don't really have any features, but they're entwined together on the bed. And And the last one is a human body that seems to be contorted but is hung by its haunches like a piece of meat. You can see the rib cage and spine, and beneath it is a black outline that kind of seems to represent a dog.
He really has some interesting color choices. I think we could spend an entire podcast simply on color choices, because this red, orange, and orange is not a color that most artists would pick for background colors because it's so vibrant and so jarring.
And then he uses, like, in the final triptych, this, like, bright, like, if you know who Philip Guston is, like, that level of, like, Pepto-Bismol pink, which most people wouldn't put with those vivids of an orange. He's got a very masterful eye for color, and he pulls off a lot of stuff that is just hard. That's one of the reasons I'm mad I've never really seen one of these in person, is I know, like, Lucian Freud's paintings, if you ever see one, there has to just be this, like, richness of depth of color that's just awe-inspiring.
It just does not photograph well. I looked him up after you said it, and it looks dull in the painting, but in the photographs, the pictures look dull, but they're not.
These series of paintings that he produces at this point, however, they set him up for the rest of his life. He's fine. He's in retrospectives. He shows well. And he can have his gay doings in a time where I'd like to stress this is about the same time when the 1960s, when Alan Turing, who saved us in World War II, was arrested because he had a boyfriend, put on chemical castratants, and killed himself because Great Britain was so not okay with homosexuality.
Which you've turned around. Thank you, Great Britain.
Yeah, thank you for being better than us, mostly.
Yeah, well,
let's not talk about Brexit. We're just going to stop. Bacon also, he doesn't really have a lot of long-term relationships. He's so kinky, he's kind of just always looking for the right guy. He does later have a lover named George Dyer. Before we start that, I want to say in 61 he moves to 7 Rees Mews, which is a converted coach house in South Kensington, Great Britain. This is where he paints for the rest of his life. It becomes like his inspired home place, and he is a slob. He piles up the ripped up canvases, pictures, all kinds of stuff. They send in an excavation team after he dies and excavated it like a antiquities site, and it's moved to the Hugh Lane Gallery in Ireland. So you can still see his studio. It's completely recreated, but he's that much of a gross guy. He just has this nasty studio that's like he just hangs out in for the rest of his life. If you see pictures of it, you're like #hoarders.
#nasty.
So, you want to talk about George Dyer for a little bit?
Sure. George Dyer was in a long-term relationship with Bacon from the early 60s up to Dyer's death from alcoholism and barbiturate overdose in 1971. Bacon's relationship with Dyer makes him paint more portraits, mostly of which are of Dyer. We're looking at Portrait of Dyer, painted by Bacon in 1966, and
there's a reference photo with this one.
We've juxtaposed the reference photo with the actual painting, and again, his color choices are just freaking beautiful.
That red purple is
so it's a painting, and to describe the photograph first, Dyer is just sitting in. I can see
it's his whitey tighties. There's several of the series.
Yeah, but he's sitting in the studio and he's just sitting normally. He is sitting with his legs crossed. His right leg is propped up on his left leg crossed. He's got his right arm across his body, down towards his abdomen, head up, sitting kind of normally, as you would as a model. And then we get to Bacon's painting, and there's a violet, almost lavender background wall, but it looks like a circular room. There's a gray, I guess it's a ceiling, inferenced, and then this red purple carpet has the background with a single door and a single light just hanging down, and Dyer is in the center, but instead of sitting normally, it's this human figure that's been turned in on itself, and it's got this mask on it, and his legs are all akimbo, and
it kind of reminds me of like that Japanese rope bondage. Roach bondage would be just extra disgusting. If that's the thing I don't want to know, don't share.
No, don't tag us in roach bondage.
I also kind of love the like single light bulb that's like reflected back on the wall in this really subtle shadow, and then again in the white against that door frame. It's
the little touches.
Yeah, it's the little touches. There's like papers on the floor which kind of reference
the nasty studio.
But it's like it becomes part of the body too.
Right. And he's turned this studio picture of Dyer, in a nice, in a dirty, normal room with square walls and everything into this scene, and it's breathtaking and terrifying.
Yeah. And their relationship's really kind of stormy and
difficult.
Yeah, I mean,
they fight often.
Yeah, the understatement. Like, in his biography, it said something random about, like, Dyer tried to frame him for having marijuana, and it's like, oh, okay.
Really?
Okay, they were that kind of, like, pissy fighting couple. All right.
Oh, God.
And then when Dyer dies, he kind of deals with the death by painting portraits of him. Let's talk about In Memory of George Dyer, 1971.
So, we've got another triptych.
Actually, it's like, yeah, it is a triptych. I'm sorry. I'm smoking that.
Don't be smoking crack before the podcast.
I buy it from your 8-year-old.
Oh, God. I told her that she's not allowed to sell to you anymore until she cuts me in on the deal.
I should pay her, anyways.
You probably should. The colors are more muted now. I think that's...
It's like a very pale lavender as the main flat background color. And there's this, like, red, purple, kind of sepatone red color and a green that arc through the three pictures, kind of like a rainbow.
But it connects them.
Mm-hmm. And there's a reference in the last one to a portrait of Dyer that he painted that's a self-portrait with a, like, huddled morning body in front of it. That's, like, dripping, like, a black substance onto the ground. The middle one's, like, this tormented body in a suit facing, like, a jilted, confusing room and, like, leaning against the door. And the very first one, it starts out with this body that's, like, crumpled and meaty and just raw and just combined together and twisted, and I'm guessing that's a reference to mourning. I mean, I lost my first husband, to say we had a stormy relationship was not...
Would be accurate.
That's maybe the, like, and we'd been divorced about 1.5 years when he died, but it's still, like, however bad the relationship was, I would never, like, the horror of losing someone that you've spent, like, 7-8 years with is just... I can kind of relate to these figures. You become this, like, twisted, sorrowful mess. Like, as much as you sometimes hated them and just never wanted to see them again, you don't want them to die. And that they are dead seems like this mockery of everything you went through. So, there's that. This is why this is the happy podcast.
I get to be the cheerful one. Oh, we're doomed.
And after that, he kind of, when he moves into the 80s, he starts doing, like, more somber self-portraits. Do you want to handle study for self-portrait 1982?
So, 80s until death. He, by this time, Bacon's obviously an established artist. He's doing well, but he's aging. Remember, he was born in 1909, so this is the 1980s now. He hasn't had an easy, well-to-do life. He's still asthmatic. He still probably has some injuries from...
He has a relationship with one of his siblings, but really, like, he's alone after his family kicks him out.
Yeah. So, study for a self-portrait 1982. Again, he's going with the muted colors that he had in the triptych after Dyer's death. This is the background is a light blue. The carpet color for the room is like this beigey tone. And then his figure is sitting off to the right of the canvas, pretty much in this bare room, sitting in a chair. You still have that human figure. It's still folded on itself and not your typical figure. His arms and legs are folded around himself, but it's easier to distinguish.
And his head kind of fades into this, like, cubist square. But, yeah, you can tell where there's hands and feet and knees and
Clothes.
Shoulders, clothing. He's not this distorted piece of, like, butchered meat like he is in a lot of... Or the figures are in a lot of his early work. Most of them aren't self-portraits.
Right.
And I also included a triptych he did right before he died from 1991. It's just titled Triptych. And it's these...
It almost looks like Monty Python when they did the cartoons with the cutouts and they had the random body parts just statically moving. I mean, so like you'd have a leg and it would move, but not like a leg would move. The foot would still be static. The leg would still be static, but it would still move. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, and there's full faces in this. It's obviously 3 paintings. There's a square towards the top that's black. With a, like, disproportionate amount at the bottom, so that they're still kind of asymmetrical. And that is completely unified across the 3 squares. And then there's these slightly meaty leg and torso figures, like, where you can tell that they're, like, feet and legs and arms, kind of, but it's still not...
It mushes together, and it turns into this torso body figure.
Especially with the center one. But there's also these, like, very realistic faces. It might have been interesting to see where he went with this. Like, I'm not as big of a fan of this one as I am some of his earlier work, but, you know, this is done in 1991. He dies in 1992. So, you know, where he went, who knows? Where he was going to go.
Right. As Vanessa said, he died in 1992 of a heart attack related to his asthma issues. He had an upper respiratory infection. He had gone to go visit a lover in Spain. His doctors told him not to because of his age and his asthma and the upper respiratory infection. And it's Francis Bacon, so he pretty much said, no, I'm going to go to Spain anyway.
Yeah, and he's also recovering from kidney cancer at this point, so it's like, geez.
Maybe you still shouldn't go. No, I'm still gonna go. I have a lover to visit.
Yeah, it's, you know, his life's kind of spent looking for this, like, physical validation of love, and he dies still looking for that.
Right.
It's kind of like his artwork starts out, like, meaty and scary, and it finishes, like, little less scary, still really meaty.
Still really disturbing.
This is just a meaty bacon podcast.
Meaty bacon.
Meaty bacon podcast. He probably liked his bacon, like, he was one of those, like, limp bacon people, I bet, not a crispy bacon person.
I'm a limp bacon person.
And he would totally judge us and, like, tisk at us for making stupid bacon. You're a limp bacon person?
I am. I like my bacon limp. Not super limp. Like, it's gotta still have some crisp to it, but, like, the fatty bits still have to be a little bit limp.
I like mine hard and snapping off in my mouth. This has been Art, I Swear. Have a creative day.
So, before we close out today, we are still obviously taking your suggestions on artists or topics that you'd like us to cover. We have picked our last topic for our LGBTQ series, but we still want to hear what you want us to talk about. So email us or Facebook us or send us a smoke signal.
Only send her a smoke signal. Just email me at artiswear@gmail.com or leave a comment or talk to us on Facebook or Twitter, or you can hit me up on Instagram. I am the Gumby Cat.
I don't even remember my Instagram.
She doesn't want to talk to you. She's
don't.
A terrible person.
I really am. I did want to touch on the Dallas shootings real quick.
Go for it.
Last weekend, there were shootings in Dallas. I want you to know that Vanessa and I were both nowhere near it, and we are fine. We do support the Black Lives Matter movement.
And yes, we know all lives matter. Thank you. We know.
Yeah,
stop.
That's not a hashtag we need to follow right now. We do want to do something later on to maybe cover this, to maybe pay tribute to what's been going on, but we haven't really thought about it yet and put anything together. So maybe here coming on, we're going to do a people of color tribute like we did with this LGBTQ series.
But we need some lighthearted fun in between.
So...
Because if Francis Bacon doesn't make you realize why we have to make jokes to cope with the horrible reality that is some people's lives, I don't know what's... Whew.
That was hard.
He needs, like, a hug and a cookie.
And a nice, normal for him relationship.
Like, maybe, like, somebody that helped him turn it down to it,
like a nice...
Like a 5 instead of having it up to, like, 11.
I'd even go for, like, an 8.2.
Yeah.
Like, give him an 8.2 on the BDSM scale.
Yeah.
And not somewhere in the 11-12 region.
He's lucky he wasn't beat to death, is what I have gathered from reading about him.
Oh, goodness, boy.
Like, he maybe would have been okay with it.
Right. So again, we need to say a thank you to our sponsor, Socially Stunning. They do...
What do they... Do you even know what I do for a living? I tried to explain this to your kid, and I think she got it better than you did.
They do social media marketing.
Yes.
You can find them at socially-stunning.com.
Good job.
That's socially-stunning.com.
I also do web pages now. I partnered with a web designer.
And she also does biographies, blurb writing for... I want to say authors and artists, and it's coming together. So artists.
And I do promotional video as well.
And you can find her at beautifulblurbs.us or socially-stunning.com.
Yes.
Boom.
Okay. That was Art, I Swear. Have a creative day this time. Loaders. If you're looking for a bacony DJ in the New York City area, Joe Giggs provided our intro and outro. That's Joe Giggs in the New York City area. All samples provided by the Conant Project, Iridile's Conant Project, documenting creepy number stations for several years now. If you want to learn more about number stations and the Cold War, check out Iridile.
Bacon!
Baconator, you
bacon,
are the
bacon,
greatest.
bacon, 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 bacon.